Ohio Republicans take aim at Planned Parenthood.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Joe Hallett, senior editor for the Columbus Dispatch, Julie Carr-Smythe, State House correspondent for the Associated Press, Michael Cole, Democratic strategist, and Michael Miller, attorney and former Franklin County prosecutor.
A week ago, Republicans and Mitt Romney lost Ohio and the presidential race. Romney lost the Ohio women's vote by 11 points, in part because of ads like this.
Planned Parenthood, we're going to get rid of that. Planned Parenthood, we're going to get rid of that.
So it was perhaps a little surprising that 7 days after their defeat, Republican state lawmakers made defunding Planned Parenthood their first order of business. An Ohio House committee okayed a bill that would take $2 million in federal funding for Planned Parenthood and give it to other health agencies first, effectively ending state-approved funding for the organization. Supporters, mainly those who oppose abortion, say the money will be spread around to better health centers. Opponents, mainly those who support abortion rights, say it will limit women's access to health care. Julie Carr-Smythe, why is this coming up now? It's not a new issue. They've talked about it for a while, but why is it now in the forefront?
Republicans suffered a horrible election day. They didn't enjoy it very much, and they're kind of trying to send a signal to their base, hey, we're still here, hey, we still have some power, and also to kind of rein in Democrats a little bit and say, wait a minute, we still control this process. That's one of my takes on what's happening. In addition, I think that they do have to act quickly because it is a lame duck session and try to give some actual action to the abortion opponents who are out there.
So do we expect this to move forward? It's out of committee, goes to the House now. Do we expect this to move forward? Is this just a sort of a token effort to appease the far right?
Well, I think it'll be really interesting to see Senate President Tom Niehaus, who has not taken up this bill yet and whose chamber is actually holding on to the heartbeat bill, which is even more controversial, has really been talking a lot about how he wants to focus on jobs. He isn't saying exactly, I don't favor these bills, but I think there's a really good chance these things could stall.
This just illustrates, in my opinion, an astounding tone deafness by Republicans. As you mentioned, 55% of Ohio women voted for Obama, and even a higher percentage of young women voted for Obama. A lot of these women are on college campuses or in poor areas of the state, and they rely on Planned Parenthood services, which obviously are much more than abortion. I mean, there are contraceptive services and other health services. I think once again we are seeing the ramifications of gerrymandering in a politically even state because we are continuing to be represented by a bunch of extremists, and they are catering to their base at a time when the broad electorate is sending them clear signals that they don't want them to go this way.
I would say that tone deafness is a wonderful illustration, but it could go as far as absolute disconnectivity here. To an audience of folks, to a constituency base, 7 out of 10 of these women rely on this as their primary source of health care. Let's take it beyond politics and just explain it from the real position it is here.
What about their argument that by taking this money and giving it to other agencies, first, that actually will increase access to health care for women, other type services that Planned Parenthood doesn't provide?
No, it doesn't free up access to health care. Some of the conduits that are going to receive this money that they're saying are federally qualified health care facilities, many of which that provide some services but aren't a catch-all net for folks who don't qualify for Medicaid, and also folks who are just uninsured, period. So the problem is that Planned Parenthood plays such a significant role in catching this cadre of women, if you will, who otherwise would not have access to services at all. Again, 7 out of 10 women that use Planned Parenthood, this is their primary source of health care.
Michael, are the Republicans overreaching here, or are they misguided in going for this and not more jobs, bills, and that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know, Mike. I wish I was smart enough to figure that out, but I think this is probably a political move on their part, simply, as Julie says, to placate, if you will, their base. And I don't know that it's going to go anywhere, but I agree that it's done primarily for politics. Simply, Planned Parenthood seems to be the one they want to attack, if that's the proper word. And as again, whether it goes anywhere or not, I don't know. I doubt that it will. But it's a gesture. Whether it's a wise gesture or not, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's my next question. Is it wise, given that gender gap that the Republicans face, at least in the presidential race? Is this a wise move?
Well, I don't think so. But you also got to remember, some people truly have ideas and beliefs, and I don't know if if you honestly believe that abortion is so bad, this is where you have to be. It's very difficult to say, all right, I'm going to give that up, give what I believe is right for political purposes. And there are some people that think that. There's no question about it.
Sure, and it's not particularly risky for them. I mean, this is definitely their base, and Planned Parenthood constituency tends to be urban, tends to be poor, tends to be 100% Democratic, you could almost say. So, it's a good way for them to say something that's pretty safe for them, not losing Republicans by doing it.
And it's also, we're talking at least, 23 months before the next statewide election. So if you get this controversy out of the way now, then memories are short. John Kasich doesn't have to run next month for governor.
Right.
With this hanging over them.
And I suspect that it's there's a lot of triangulating going on all these women's issues for a lot of reasons. We're seeing, these other bills shifting and moving too, and it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
This has been a pretty conservative legislative session. We had the guns in the bars, these are the heartbeat bill, Senate Bill 5. Do we anticipate the next session to be similar, the one that starts in January?
I think it might be a little less so, because Republicans, even as we speak, are sitting and waiting for three of their incumbents, whether they're going to beat Democrats. There will be a few candidates in there who came in as a result of the Senate Bill 5 backlash, and I think that those voices. And then we have Chris Redfern back, who is the Democratic chairman of the state, and he's going to be a state lawmaker again. So at least it'll be lively.
Lively indeed. Well, because the 2012 election was so long ago, it's been more than a week now. It's finally time to start speculating about 2014 and 2016. While we media folks like us love to speculate and we get heat for it, that the politicians are keeping at least one eye on future races. Among the hottest names for president 4 years from now, Rob Portman and John Kasich. And this is what John Kasich put on his Facebook page this week. He writes, "The folks in D.C. should look to Ohio, follow our model for change and our commitment to growth-oriented policies designed to get folks back to work. It works here, it'll work elsewhere." Joe Hallett, that statement is not new. The governor has said that over and over again. But now it's on, after the election in 2012. Should we look at it a little differently? Is that a theme for a future national run?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, he can't really talk about it at this point. He's got to get past re-election in 2014, and that won't be easy. I mean, there's 4 Democrats who are thinking about it right now. Ted Strickland, Ed Fitzgerald in Cuyahoga County, Richard Cordray, and Tim Ryan, the congressman. It all starts with Strickland. He will make a decision by year's end because he would be the hands-down favorite in a primary. I happen to think maybe the best candidate, by the way, Strickland is the guy that Kasich wants to run against, but I happen to think the best candidate would be Ed Fitzgerald, the former FBI agent who is now county executive in Cuyahoga County. He can say that he turned around a county that was mired in corruption. But yeah, Kasich can't talk about presidency in 2016 at this point, but the people around him whisper about it. They've got it in their mind's eye, and this could be the first time since 1916 when Ohio has 2 viable presidential candidates. If Rob Portman also is in the mix,
Would 2 Ohio Republicans running for president at the same time? It seems kind of crowded.
I don't think that's going to happen, Mike.
You're going to flip a coin, see who runs?
I don't know how they'll decide, but I don't think you'll see 2 of them running. And Joe's absolutely right. 2016 is so far away, maybe 3016. Anything can happen. He's got to get by the gubernatorial election. But is he a potential candidate? Sure. But I think an incumbent governor and any major state is always a potential candidate. So I would think that he's somebody that is looking at it, as with Senator Portman, but it's a long way to go.
I suspect that this whole presidential season kind of got under Kasich's skin. I mean, Kasich has a positive story he believes he has to tell there. As you remember, he tried endorsing a couple different presidential candidates who didn't go anywhere. Didn't actually endorse Romney until he was the nominee, and then went to the convention and basically had to carry a storyline or either carry it or contradict it because it didn't match what was going on in the state. So I think that he wanted to get that message out on his Twitter page in order to begin that reversal of what he felt like wasn't really fair.
Looking to 2014, Michael Cole, John Kasich by this time in 2008 had really started his run for governor. He was speaking to folks around the state, Republicans around the state. Who would be the best candidate from your side to run against John Kasich?
I think all of them make absolute good candidates. I think between Ed Fitzgerald and Richard Cordray, quite honestly, have strong narratives, and Richard particularly with regards to his advocacy of working families and his protection of consumer rights and his connectivity to Washington. I think that he's a guy that has a pretty strong narrative, pretty strong case.
One thing that happened the last cycle was two sitting governors decided not to run for re-election. Well, not the last cycle, last couple cycles. Mitt Romney did not run for re-election, decided to run for president. Tim Pawlenty did not run for re-election, decided to run for president. John Kasich's not going to, of course, it didn't work out for those two guys either, but John Kasich is not going to forego 2014 to run for president, I think.
No, I think if Kasich does want to run for president, he needs the vindication of a first term. And because he did a lot of controversial things and a lot of brave things, and I think a lot of necessary things, and he needs voters to put their stamp of approval on that, and then he'll be a stronger candidate going forward to 16. I think there's a sense that Richard Cordray could be in line for U.S. Attorney General if Eric Holder decides to step down. That'd be a hard position for him to turn down. I think there's also a sense that, as Michael said, my opinion is Fitzgerald's the best candidate. Maybe Cordray's the best governor. Strickland is the easiest candidate for Kasich to run against because Ted Strickland had the unfortunate circumstance of having to govern through the recession, and all Kasich is going to have to do is say, remember the bad old days.
400,000 jobs lost,
yep.
And I've gained X amount of jobs. Whether the governor has anything to do with job loss or job gain.
Exactly.
That's the message. The Kasich administration has told the federal government Ohio would rather the federal government set up the state's health insurance exchange. That means the federal government will set up and run a system where individuals and small businesses can select health insurance plans, pooling their resources, spreading the risk, and theoretically getting better coverage at lower rates. Julie Carr-Smythe, why is Ohio letting the feds take this?
The official reason is that they were not provided very much flexibility as a state, and so they're going to have the end result that is exactly the same. They might as well not have to go through all those loopholes. The unofficial reason is here on this paper that I brought, which is before I even left my office, within a few hours of the announcement, there was a fundraising letter that went out that said John Kasich has rejected Obamacare for Ohio. There's the political element that a lot of Republican governors are being able to say, we're rejecting Obamacare and accepting it at the same time.
Because they're only rejecting, they're saying we don't want to run one part of the health care law.
Exactly.
That's what confuses me. I see it as the Obamacare law actually gives states latitude to either accept it or not accept it, or accept it on certain terms that give the state the autonomy to some measure to control how Medicaid is dispensed and how this whole piece works in terms of insurance regulation. It's not a rejection. The law is the law. I mean, the law is the law. It's not a rejection. It's clearly the governor saying that this part of Obamacare I will not accept, but we want to maintain, because of the special way that insurance works here in the state of Ohio, we want to maintain autonomy over that process. I can concede to that because it seems like this is a go as you grow kind of process anyway with this new Obamacare piece, particularly as it relates to insurance.
So there's a little bit of irony here, too, more than a little bit, and that is before Obamacare, Republicans generally were in favor of these health exchanges. And the other piece of irony is that they typically cry for more states' control. And here in Ohio, we have hospitals and business leaders advocating for the state to set up its own exchange so that it has better control and can tailor its system to the needs of the state. So I think they were hoping they wouldn't have to deal with this because Mitt Romney would get elected and he was going to repeal Obamacare, but now they can't escape it.
Michael, I mean, what about the state control? Now, the Kasich administration says this was state-run in name only, that the federal government had placed so many strings attached so many strings to this that Ohio did not have the freedom to run the insurance or regulate the insurance industry as it does now.
Well, I think that's what he said, and whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. I suspect there's some truth to it. I agree with what Michael said. I think it is a growing process, and they're arguing politically. As Julie said, we've turned down Obamacare. Obviously, they can't turn it down because it is the law, but that segment to run this thing. And I think they do that for a reason. They're saying it saves them money. And I think I saw today where at least it's predicted that Wisconsin and Indiana, the Republican governors, are going to do the same thing. So maybe it's from the Republican Governors Conference, which just finished, there's an agreement amongst a lot of them to do this. I don't know.
When does the law is going to go into effect? The president's going to be in office for 4 years. By the time he leaves, it'll be fully in effect. Does the vitriol over the health care law fade eventually, do you believe?
I think it depends how it works.
Yeah.
If it works well, it'll fade from the Republican side. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't, it'll ratchet up.
Right, and I think that as individual programs come online and people start to see which pieces of it work for their lives or don't, then that will decide
and how much they have to pay each month for their health insurance premium is the bottom line, I guess. Advocates and lawmakers are taking another look at how we elect judges, specifically Ohio Supreme Court justices. This is because two justices elect with fine Irish names upset two sitting justices. Sharon Kennedy and William O'Neill beat Yvette McGee Brown and Robert Cupp. Many believe these people were elected mainly because of their names, and now they're looking for changes in campaigns or possibly even appointing judges based on merit. Mr. Prosecutor, Mr. Attorney, what do you make of this? Do you think is that why you never ran for a Supreme Court justice, because you didn't have a fine Irish name?
Well, let me just say this. Do you think this is the first time anybody's been elected on a name? It's so hard to explain. And add to that, Mike, we have one incumbent Democrat and one incumbent Republican.
Yeah.
And who, as far as I know, there was no animosity against either one of them. And they both lost by pretty large margins. It's hard to explain. I suppose the name thing may be the answer to it. I don't think the R&Ds do anything. I think Chris is doing this because
he thinks it's going to on the ballot.
That's right. I think he's doing this because he thinks it'll benefit the Democrats. He's probably right. It don't have anything to do with good government or good judges. I don't know the answer. We're talking about, I think Justice Piper said, if you do that, it doesn't tell enough. Of course it doesn't. They are restricted in things they can say, but in many ways they should be. I mean, anything that's going to come before the court, you should be able to come out and say, I'm going to send, you do this, I'm going to uphold the death penalty, or you do this. You can't do that. Yeah. So you have to be limited. But I just don't know what the answer is. I don't think people are really interested enough to sit down and study judicial candidates. On a local level, it's all right. You're going to know somebody who knows them. You can usually work it out. But statewide, the justices that are on there that aren't from Franklin County, I didn't know when they went on.
I have disagree a little bit with you, Mike, because I used to go around and around with the late Chief Justice Tom Moyer about this, who advocated merit selection. And in the absence of merit selection, I think we have to recognize that we elect our judges, therefore our judges are politicians. They run in primaries with R's and D's behind their names. Some of the best politicians I've ever met are judges. And we cannot continue to pretend that they live in a cocoon, that they do not have their own beliefs about abortion and gun control and all these other hot button issues. So why don't we
Lay it on the table.
lay it on the table? Here's what I believe in, but I promise to you that I will follow the law of the land, and that my own prejudices on this will not overcome or supersede the law. I mean, these guys are politicians.
Well, the last I checked, though, McGee is an Irish name.
That's what it's literally McGee. It's McGee Brown.
And not only that, but Robert Cupp, I mean, I think the Republican Party came out with an extremely negative ad against O'Neill. I actually suspect they did it to label him by party. They said, hey, you know, the Republican Party sponsored this ad to say that O'Neill sides with rapists, and I think it backfired on them, and I think that they, you know, wanted that label out there.
I want to add the caveat of looking at this from a legal perspective, and I agree with you, Michael. I'm not that privy to this merit system. I think that the merit system creates a hierarchy where lawyers control this system and actually take it out of the hands of people. Our judges should be elected and should be accountable to a constituency, first and foremost. Secondly, to your argument about, you know, this idea of adhering to the law impartially. By law, they have to do that. There's something called the Ohio canons, Michael, right? That say you actually have to adhere to this based on independence, impartiality, all of these great things that actually make you a judge 24 hours a day. You are judged by conduct, by character, by profession. I think that the Ohio conducts cover that very well. It's just that, you know, I think some folks got sour about losing a campaign and now want to change the rules of the game. Yeah. We don't need to change the rules of the game. We just need to make sure that we continue to have judges that rule and make decisions based on the rule of law. Bottom line, that's what they're here for.
We'll get to our last topic. Mayor Coleman is out with his new budget for the city of Columbus, and here's what is not a problem for the mayor: money. Helped by a 25% increase of the income tax 3 years ago, growing employment, and a new casino with lots of money coming into the city's coffers. The city is increasing spending by between 3 and 5%, but it's able to also fill its savings account to $50 million, a goal the city has reached a year early. So, Michael Cole, my question to you is, when do you think the city council will vote to repeal some or all of that income tax hike from a few years ago?
Yeah, you know, that...
They got a surplus.
That's unfair. I mean, who knows what these lawmakers are going to do? I think the biggest thing is that we have a budget here. The mayor's proposed a budget that I think is smart. I think it's safe. And I think it's sustainable. I think it's smart from the standpoint of making the right investments in job creation. You know, he's talking about this whole 2020 vision of 150,000 jobs being brought to the city. I think that's brilliant. Investing in our parks and recs and quality of life, right? Investing in some new entrepreneurial things around film. If you're looking at Northeast Ohio, you see that they've done a great deal of money making in the Avengers, Alex Cross. I mean, you name it, they've done it well. But this is a budget that's on point.
But this budget is doing very well revenue-wise, and the economy really hasn't fully recovered yet. What happens when we add all those jobs, and there's a lot of money? And there is a surplus. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I think you take the rainy day fund, which he has up to $50 million, and said, I believe yesterday he wants to move to 75. Yeah. And if all those things happen as you say, I would hope instead of spend like on the railroad or whatever that we were talking about.
Streetcar for a while, yeah.
We build that for 75 to 125 to 150 million. Because he also said, and he is right, that rainy day will come again, and it would be wonderful to see the city in a position where they have that. And it's not used later on down the line when people want, you know, again, more raises and so forth. Let's go get it out of the rainy day fund. So I think he's doing the right thing.
Julie, the state has cut money to the city. Governor Kasich has cut the government fund, so it's not all good news money-wise.
Right, and it's always that threat of the state budget when it comes through, that more of that money to the local government fund, to the school districts is going to be cut, and this is a way to pad themselves a little bit in light of that.
Okay. Let's get to our off-the-record final parting shots. Michael Miller, you're up first.
I would simply say the discussion on merit selection, which I used to be against, now I'm for. I'm always going to be a loser. It's not going to change. Things will stay exactly as they are now when it comes to the judicial elections.
Okay. Michael.
I think that Democrats, as much as we're beating our chest on this new election, the results, I think that we still have a lot of uphill work to do, and I think that a lot of our folks in the legislature are visionary in that manner and will make it work.
Julie.
I think moral issues won't be the only ones at the legislature during the lame duck. I think we'll see a big debate on the energy efficiency standard, perhaps repealing that or bringing it down and requiring energy companies to do less with it.
And Joe.
I think as we approach the fiscal cliff, House Speaker John Boehner will rue the day he ever gerrymandered so many safe districts, because now he is left with a bunch of extremists who will not deal.
Yeah, they boxed themselves in. My final comment, NASCAR is returning to Ohio. The Nationwide Children's 200 is going to be at Mid-Ohio. I find that pairing a little odd, the Children's Hospital with a decidedly dangerous sport. But I guess if they wear their seatbelts, it'll all work for all involved. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. We urge you to continue the conversation online. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew here at WOSU at COSI and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week and a happy Thanksgiving.